In European architecture, there has long been a custom, especially among the French and the British, to name current architectural styles after whomever the reigning monarch happens to be. And that is where you get the term Victorian architecture. The British named it after Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria ruled Great Britain and Ireland from June 1837 until 1901, a fairly long period. Actually, it would be more appropriate to call the architectural styles conceived during this time styles conceived in the Victorian era, rather than just Victorian styles, for they differed in appearance. You see what I mean? Some of the styles that came to the forefront during this era were Neo-Greek, Renaissance Revival, and Jacobean, just to name a few. Martin, you have a question? Yes, I was wondering why, if Victorian architecture started in England, why is it so commonly found in the United States? Good question, with a simple answer. During the 18th century, some English architects emigrated to British colonies and former British colonies, such as the United States. These immigrants introduced the Victorian architectural styles to their new homelands.
One of the more interesting subfields of linguistics is speech synthesis. The field of speech synthesis has become more important as a discipline in the last few decades because of its usefulness in various technological fields. To put it simply, speech synthesis is the artificial production of human speech. So, you see how this relates to modern technology. There are different computer systems these days that imitate human speech, normally in the form of a speech synthesizer, and nowadays these synthesizers can be used in both software and hardware. Yes, John?
In the reading, though, I found that speech synthesis has been around much longer than any of this new technology that you are talking about.
That is very true. Speech synthesizers existed in much simpler forms such as, Christian Krankenstein's work is a good example. Krankenstein was a Russian scientist who built models of the human vocal tract, what we normally call the larynx. This was back in the late 1700s, but his first models could only produce 5 long vowel sounds, although other scientists did make improvements on his and their own models over time.
Listen to each lecture, then choose the best answers to the questions. Listen to part of a lecture in a history class. Historians should, of course, do their best to be true to the past. But this class is designed to raise a very important question, and that is, which past is it we are doing our best to be true to? Seeing as there are so many aspects of mankind to examine, both positive and negative, scholars must make a choice. They have to decide which aspects deserve attention and which do not. Topicality becomes relevant when current social concerns affect which aspects are focused on by the scholars. In the past, 30 years or so, there has been something of a broadening of the scope of historical inquiry. There are different reasons for this, but the biggest is due to the result of a relatively small minority of historians who are responding to the demands of topicality. A good example would be the new urban history that came out of the crisis in America's cities during the 1960s. This vein of history stresses social mobility, minority politics, and inner-city deprivation. This focus on minorities, especially African Americans, gave rise to an increased interest in Africa, an issue of topicality. Number 1. Why does the professor mention the new urban history? Listen to part of a lecture in an environmental science class.
Despite the name, acid rain encompasses all kinds of precipitation, such as snow and sleet, not only rain. As you should have read over the weekend, acid rain refers to precipitation whose acid content, or acidity, exceeds the normal pH level. The normal pH level for precipitation is pH 5.6 on the pH scale. The lower the number, the more acidic the substance. Now, how precipitation becomes more acidic is very simple. We see it every day. The burning of coal or of gasoline in our cars, for instance. The burning of fossil fuels emits high amounts of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides, and these dangerous substances end up in our precipitation. Even though we know acid rain is dangerous, there is actually no concrete evidence showing that acid rain is harmful to us. Humans, directly, such as if we are caught in the rain. However, it has been proven that when it falls into lakes and rivers, it makes the water more acidic, which kills off water life. There is more proof to show that acid rain damages trees, and at a pH of 3.0 or lower, then it can even kill crops. So sooner or later, acid rain does indeed affect us.
Number 2. How does the professor conclude the lecture? Listen to part of a lecture in a music class.
Now, take a look at this next slide. This is obviously a drum of African origin. Can anyone tell me the name of the drum and where it gets its name? Yes, you there.
That particular drum is called a djembe, and it gets its name from, the gem tree, a kind of sycamore tree. They call it a djembe because the drum makers often use wood from the gem trees to make them.
Good job. It is a djembe, as you said, but the gem tree being the source of the name is only one common theory. In the West African country of Mali, the Bamana people say djembe comes from the saying anke je, anke be. In the Bamana language, je is the verb for gather and be means peace. So, djembe can be translated to everyone gathered together in peace. Thus, if we can believe the explanation put forth by the Bamana, then the name of the drum perfectly describes its purpose, for the djembe plays a huge musical role in tribal gatherings.
Number 3. How is the lecture organized? Listen to part of a lecture in a communication class. Okay, let's set aside the issue of racism and look at another factor. Another issue concerning immigration to English-speaking countries like the United States or Australia and so on is the issue of language. The parents of immigrant families have to consider the needs of their children when deciding whether to speak in their mother tongue or English when at home. Many parents choose to speak English when it is the most widely spoken language of their adopted country so that their children will not be at a disadvantage when they start school or have to interact with the native English-speaking population. Along those same lines, they believe that having the native tongue as their children's first language will help the children fit into society easier and more naturally and give them a sense of belonging. The immigrant parents themselves, they are often painfully aware of a feeling of not belonging, no matter how kind their English-speaking neighbors are or how successful their lives in their new country is. However, by not using their mother tongue, parents may find it more difficult to discuss serious topics with their children or to discipline them because the parents cannot express themselves well enough in English. Number 4. Why does the professor mention serious topics? Listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class. Your goal in studying this collection of case studies is to sort out what explains an individual's ability to cope with different levels of stress. Now, in order for you to do this, it is very important that you are able to distinguish between the 3 different kinds of resources to which people resort when they encounter stress. The first of these resources is the external support available to the person undergoing stress. Maria?
Such as friends and family?
Exactly. Our entire network of social supporters makes up the first type of resources. The second of these is made up of each individual's psychological resources, such as each person's educational background, intelligence, and several other relevant personality factors. As you can imagine, these vary to extreme degrees depending upon the person.
Personality factors such as what?
Well, for instance, whether or not the person is introverted or extroverted. When a person moves to a new city or gets a new job, that personality trait will help determine how stressed out the person gets, right? Okay, the third of these types of resources and we will go into more detail concerning this type later, are the coping strategies a person uses to confront stress. Number 5. Why does the professor mention personality factors? Listen to part of a lecture in an economics class.
Now I'd like to focus on a different kind of monopoly known as a natural monopoly. Natural monopolies are created under circumstances where the largest supplier in an industry possesses an overwhelming cost advantage over its actual and potential competitors in the industry. The one holding a natural monopoly is oftentimes the first supplier in a particular industry's market. Natural monopolies tend to occur where capital costs predominate. This creates economies of scale that are large in relation to the market size, which in turn creates high barriers to the entry of competition. Whether you realize it or not, you are very familiar with some natural monopolies. For instance, public utilities, those who supply us with electricity, communications, natural gas, and water services. You can easily see how capital costs would predominate, for it is extremely expensive to build and maintain the supplies of electricity and water. I'm referring to the pipelines that bring us water and gas, and the lines that bring us electricity and telephone transmissions. Now, because of the high costs involved in supplying these services, it is highly unlikely that a competitor would be willing to sink enough cash into the industry to rival the one holding the monopoly.
Number 6. Why does the professor mention capital costs? Listen to a conversation between a teacher's assistant and a student.
Hi, you are John Stiles, right? You are Dr. Perkins' assistant?
Yeah, that's right. Can I do something for you? If this is a complaint about a grade, I just check the multiple choice and fill in the blank questions. Dr. Perkins checks all the essays, so...
No, it's nothing like that. No complaints. I would just like to ask a favor, if it is okay.
Oh, okay. I mean, you can ask me, but I can't promise anything. What is it?
Well, I was wondering whether or not the seating arrangement in Dr. Perkins' 1 o'clock class is set in stone.
Well, that depends. Are you in the Monday, Wednesday, Friday class or the Tuesday, Thursday class?
Does it matter?
Yeah. You see, both classes are held in the Monroe building, but the Monday, Wednesday, Friday class is held in room 212, and the Tuesday, Thursday class is held in room 218. So, which is it?
I'm in the Tuesday, Thursday class in room 218.
Then, yes, I'm sorry, but the seating arrangement is set. There is no moving around. Unless someone is absent, then you can sit in their seat. What is the problem, anyway?
Well, seeing as you're his assistant, you know that Dr. Perkins is a really soft-spoken man. My assigned seat is way in the back of the room, and I only catch 60 to 70% of what he says. If someone coughs while he is talking, I completely miss what he says. I mean, I'm afraid it is going to really hurt my grade in the end.
Yeah, he is a quiet man. That is why room 218 has assigned seating. The students compete too much for seats up close. There have been some very ugly arguments in the past.
Well, do you have any suggestions?
Actually, yes. I suggest that you switch to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday class in room 212 if it is at all possible to do so.
But that room is huge. How would I ever hear him? Even if I do sit in the front, his voice still won't carry.
True, but room 212 has a microphone system. Number 1. Why does the student speak to the teacher's assistant? Number 2. According to the conversation, what are some reasons for changing classrooms? Choose 3 answers. Number 3. Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question. Can I do something for you? If this is a complaint about a grade, I just check the multiple choice and fill in the blank questions. Dr. Perkins checks all the essays, so... Why does the TA say this? I just check the multiple choice and fill in the blank questions. Listen to part of a lecture in an economics class. Whether you have given it any thought or not, there are many multinational corporations that specialize in different types of products out there. Burger King, Pizza Hut, and McDonald's with their fast food. Adidas, Reebok, and Nike with their shoes and sportswear. Budweiser and Marlboro. You get the idea. Even though you can find these products all over the globe and in nearly every country, to varying degrees, each of them has a head office based in a single nation. But each of these companies also has branch offices and factories for manufacturing their products in many other countries. By definition, that is what makes them multinational corporations. In a discussion about multinational corporations, I suppose a good place to start is with what impels them to establish operations outside of their nations of origin in the first place. Well, quite simply, it is the goal of every business to grow, right? Once a company has grown as large, or nearly as large as it possibly can in its home country, then it only makes sense to expand into new markets located in other countries. This is only logical if a company hopes to continue to grow. There are other logical reasons to move into foreign markets that are not so obvious, however. For instance, a company might plan to move into a foreign market for other reasons concerning money. Like if a company, Nike for example, exports their shoes and sportswear to a foreign market, they will have to pay more taxes and tariffs because their products are imports. But if Nike has a factory in, let's say, France, then they won't have to pay the French tariffs when they sell in that market. That is because the shoes made in France are not imports. It is considered a domestic product, even if the head office is located in the United States. Another way to save money by having production facilities in other nations is calculated in labor costs. Unfortunately, some big corporations have factories in lesser developed nations where they can take advantage of cheaper labor. On a moral level, well, this may seem shameful. But if you own a company, it is just good business because it lowers your manufacturing costs, which result in more profit made from your products. Many corporations, I don't want to name names, but they are ones you are very familiar with, have come under scrutiny for this practice. Number 4. What is the main topic of the lecture? Number 5. According to the professor, what are some reasons for expanding overseas? Choose 2 answers. Number 6. What is the professor's attitude towards companies that move their production overseas to utilize cheap labor? Listen to a conversation between a student and an employee from the admissions office.
Excuse me, sir. I was wondering if this is where I need to be if I am having problems with my admissions documents.
Yes, this is the place. Let me have your name and we'll figure out how to fix your problems.
Okay, great. My name is Janet Terry.
Okay, it looks like almost everything is here. Your letters of recommendation, completed financial aid forms, test scores, application to the university. Uh-oh, you're still missing your transcripts from high school. There is a note here saying that you were having difficulties getting your high school transcripts.
Yes, that's right. What happened is that my class was the last class to graduate from the high school that I went to. Well, actually, they just relocated to a larger campus because the student population had outgrown the campus they were on. Anyway, when they moved to the new campus, they lost a lot of very important records, including transcripts for several hundred students. And that is what is causing me problems enrolling for my first semester here.
That certainly is a problem. We need a completed application form in order for us to send you the enrollment package. The package contains your student identification, the name of your academic advisor, and other information vital to your life as a student here. We really need those high school transcripts.
Yes, but there is nothing I can do right now. I have been in contact with the principal of my old high school, and she said that they have found the missing transcripts, but it is going to take some time to sort out the mess and get the transcripts out to the students that need them. She said that they should be here no later than the second week of September. But my first semester here is scheduled to start on the 1st of September. Is there any way at all that I could unofficially register for my classes and then have my status changed to officially registered after the transcripts arrive?
Actually, yes, that is possible. Would you happen to have unofficial transcripts from your high school?
Oh, yes. Here they are. Everyone with missing transcripts was given these unofficial transcripts. They don't show the specific classes or grades that I received, but it is notarized to prove that I did indeed graduate from high school. Do they help at all?
Yes, they help. We can work with this for now. Also, give me the telephone number where we can reach the principal of your high school. We would like to stay in contact with her until we get this cleared up. In the meantime, we can grant you temporary acceptance until your official records arrive. Once I input this information into the system, you can register for your classes and get started like everyone else in the fall. Of course, if we are unable to acquire those official high school transcripts by at least the end of September, we'll have to cancel your registration. Any of the work you have completed up to that point will be rendered null and void.
I'm sure that my high school principal will get it all straightened out. I'm not the only one putting pressure on her to sort out this kind of mess. I really appreciate all of your help in this situation.
Don't mention it. It's my job to help out in whatever way I can. Number 7. What are the speakers mainly discussing? Number 8. What does the student say about her high school transcripts? Number 9. Why does the student mention the notarized document? Number 10. What can be inferred about the student's enrollment? Number 11. Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
I'm sure that my high school principal will get it all straightened out. I'm not the only one putting pressure on her to sort out this kind of mess. I really appreciate all of your help in this situation.
What does the student imply when she says this?
I'm not the only one putting pressure on her to sort out this kind of mess.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class. Okay, last time we met, we were talking about the relationship between plants and their various pollinators. We determined that this relationship is an example of mutualism. Sybil, can you please sum up for the class what a mutualistic relationship is?
Sure. Well, a mutualistic relationship is a type of symbiotic relationship. These are relationships where two or more organisms benefit, to varying degrees, from the relationship. Plants and their pollinators have mutualistic relationships, as you said. This means that there are mutual benefits. The plants use their pollinators to ensure that cross-pollination takes place, and the pollinators use the plants as sources of food. I guess you could say that they benefit equally.
Very good, Sybil. Now let's talk about how this mutualistic relationship between plants and pollinators came into existence. The key to how these relationships got started can be found in evolution. Well, actually, seeing as there is more than one type of organism involved, you could say that the key is found in coevolution. You see, changes in structure and function of both plants and their pollinators occurred over time. They evolved to be dependent on one another. The evidence for this coevolution can be seen through observations of the organisms involved. For instance, the colors and odors of flowers are exactly suited to the senses of the pollinators. And the mouthparts of pollinators are suited to work with the structures of the flowers. Additionally, the kinds of food provided by the flowers are perfectly suited to provide for the nutritional needs of the pollinators. Another observation of this coevolution is that the times that the pollinators are active and out foraging for food match up perfectly with the times that the flowers have their blooms open. It's a wonderful synchronized system. Yes, Sybil.
Does this perfect system of coevolution apply to all types of plants and pollinators? Surely there must be variation on the system.
Certainly, yes, there are variations. I suppose the best way to demonstrate these variations of the mutualistic relationship between plants and pollinators would be to talk about them in turn. If I say pollinator, what organism first comes to mind?
Bees. Honeybees in particular.
Excellent choice. Let's start with bees then. Okay, you may not be aware of it, but there are actually no fewer than 20,000 different species of bees that pollinate flowers and other kinds of plants. As Sybil mentioned, honeybees are the most famous of the pollinating bees. This is because they have evolved to be the perfect pollinators, especially for flowers. The first aspect of bee anatomy that makes them such excellent pollinators is their sense of vision. Bee eyes see a totally different spectrum of light than most other animals, us humans, for example. A bee's visible spectrum is shifted so that they do not see red wavelengths, but they do see ultraviolet wavelengths. This is why flowers pollinated by bees are usually very brightly colored, predominantly yellow or blue, not usually entirely red. It is also believed that the flowers pollinated by bees also have ultraviolet shadings called honey guides. Seeing as humans don't see in ultraviolet wavelengths, we cannot see these honey guides. Typically, these honey guides lead the bees straight to the parts of the flowers that contain the flower's reproductive structures, which is the main goal of pollination, right? The flowers need the bees to deposit pollen from other flowers onto their reproductive structures. What is another anatomical feature of bees that aid in the mutualistic relationship?
Their mouths? Their mouths feature long tubes that contain the bees' tongues.
Great, Sybil. You are on a roll today. That's right. The tubular mouths of bees are an evolved adaptation that allows bees to suck up nectar provided by the plants. This nectar is normally found at the base of the flower, so the bee has to get deep down into the flower, which increases the chances of the bees depositing pollen on the reproductive structures of the flowers. Now, the flowers that attract bees do so with a sweet and fragrant odor. This advertises to any bees flying around out there that nectar is available from the flower. Back to the honey guides. They often point to a narrow tube that is large enough for a bee's tubular mouth to get into, but the narrow tube is too small for other insects to reach the nectar. You can see that the flowers are showing favoritism towards the bees, right? Here is an important point. We know that the flowers need the bees to leave pollen behind when they are sucking up nectar, right? Well, the bees are not purposely leaving the pollen for the flowers. The bees also need the pollen because they use it as food for their larvae, for the baby bees. The pollen sticks to the bristly hairs on the bees' legs and bodies. But the flowers make sure that the bees leave behind some of the pollen by providing the bees with a place to land to eat. These landing platforms have evolved to be shaped in a way that will ensure that the bees rub against the flower and leave behind some pollen. Number 12. What is the main topic of the lecture? Number 13. Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question. What is another anatomical feature of bees that aid in the mutualistic relationship?
Their mouths feature long tubes that contain the bees' tongues.
Great, Sybil. You are on a roll today. That's right. The tubular mouths of bees are an evolved adaptation that allows bees to suck up nectar provided by the plants. Why does the professor say this? You are on a roll today. Number 14. According to the lecture, what are the ways in which plants attract pollinators? Choose two answers. Number 15. What can be inferred from the professor's explanation about honeybees? Number 16. What does the professor say about honeybees' vision? Number 17. How does the professor highlight important points in his lecture?